Come see us on tour. We're going to be in Baltimore, Hartford, Connecticut, Syracuse, Atlantic City, Levittown, New York, Cohoes, New York, and Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. Here, I had Christian Parenti. He wrote this article. It said, progressives should cheer Trump's FBI purge. The Bureau bullied anti-war radicals like my father. And he says Trump 2.0 is a battle-hardened and arrives with a wrecking crew and an aggressive plan to dismantle or weaken the key institutions of America's unaccountable security state. He says this is good and necessary. And let me just show you what he said when I had him on the show. This is what he said.
Well, I'm supportive of his going after the FBI because the FBI is out of control for better part of a century. It has targeted primarily the left, including organized labor and all manner of social movements. It's been very destructive. It hasn't just repressed the left. It's also actively engaged in misdirecting and confusing the left. And it's a real problem. It's not just that it's a nuisance, but it is a real threat. It is a cancer within American democracy. So I think this is a very important opportunity to deal with this rogue agency. And many on the left will say, well, you know, they'll just replace it with something worse or as bad. But we don't know that. And also, there's going to be an opening. If they actually dismantle this thing or cripple it or you know, really attack it, you know, that's going to undo all sorts of you know, an institutional legacy, an institutional knowledge, which is unhelpful for democracy and unhelpful for progressive politics. So get rid of it and you know, pressure the government, pressure the Trump administration to make sure that there isn't some recreation of the FBI. Also, it's unrealistic to think that you know, you can recreate almost a century of something overnight. I mean, this is an agency with really serious momentum, a legacy of intimidating and bullying. So that's the kind of abstract reason. And more specifically, as I mentioned in this piece for Unheard, you know, my father, Michael Parenti, was a radical, again, you know, anti-imperialist peace activist in the 60s and 70s and was targeted by the FBI, not as badly as members of the Black Panthers who were, you know, imprisoned and killed and stuff like that. But my father was beaten up pretty badly by the cops and harassed for a long time by the FBI, got his file, had a thick file. They bothered my mother, you know. So I was raised with these guys being the enemy, not in some abstract sense, but like rather tangibly. So that's why I'm in favor of removing these bullies from our politics, if possible.
So what I share that view. I've had people push back on me saying things like they're just going to replace the old goons with the new goons. Do you agree? What do you say? Do you agree with him or?
I agree with his characterization of the FBI. I mean, the FBI was really created to destroy leftist movements. And I mean, they ruined so many lives, including Billie Holiday's. And they went after jazz singers, if you remember.
Yeah.
No, they were awful. We know from COINTELPRO, and of course they murdered Fred Hampton and withdrew the FBI protection from Martin Luther King after he denounced the Vietnam War. And both King and Johnson and the FBI knew damn well what that meant, given the plethora of death threats against him. So I agree with his characterization, but I do think they're just replacing the old goons with goons who are going to be loyal to Trump. You know, nobody's talking about getting rid of the FBI or let's talk about the CIA, which has probably done more damage and across the world. You know, it hardly made us safer. I mean, it's the whole, when I was overseas, I watched in the embassies how they just became, the diplomatic corps shrunk and the ambassadors didn't even know what the CIA station chief was doing in their own country. So even when I covered the war in El Salvador, we got the phone list from the embassy. 60% of the people in the embassy had the same extension because it was the CIA, including the deputy director of the Phoenix program. So there's been a long assault against diplomacy and against the diplomatic corps and a militarization within, you know, the diplomatic corps. We got off in the CIA, but I don't think he's going to. I think he's going to bring it to heel because he is not wrong. You know, I'm talking about Trump. He's not wrong in the sense that these institutions actively sought to bring him down. There's no question about that. And anybody who has any doubts about it, as soon as these guys left office, they couldn't be on CNN and MSNBC fast enough. Clapper, remember Clapper?
Yes.
James Clapper. I sued him. I sued him actually in the Supreme Court. But
is that when
Clapper was what?
And how did that turn out?
Well, I and a bunch of journalists sued him because of the belief that we were being surveilled by the NSA, and it was Clapper versus Amnesty International. So I was one of the journalists in the suit, and the federal lawyers got up, this is before Snowden, got up in the court and said, if any of these journalists were actually being watched by the government, we would tell them. Yeah, that's the world we live in, Jimmy. And so the Supreme Court said, well, then I guess there's no case.
Just like wasn't it Clapper who said to Congress that they don't gather,
right.
They don't surveil normal America? Well, of course they do. That Edward Snowden proved it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So anyway, that's an aside. But this is still kind of a mystery to me. Then why did the deep state, if Trump is just going to do all those things in Project 2025, why did the deep state oppose him so vehemently? Because they can't, because he's impetuous and they can't control him, and he's an embarrassment to the empire. So even in Biden's severe cognitive decline, they could still push him out in front of a teleprompter. I mean, yes, he'd read turn right and stuff like that, and stumble over, words with more than 2 syllables. And he did what he was told. Obama did what he was told. I mean, they don't trust him to manage the empire, and they're not wrong about that. I mean, he's not a good manager of empire. That's why.
Yeah, meaning. Yeah, okay.
Well, destroying AID. AID is weapon. I know because I worked for 20 years in the global south. I watched how AID worked. It is a really dark. The sad thing is that they do have programs for clean water, and it's all transactional in HIV, and I hate to see that go. But on the other hand, it's a dark force, and it is used. It's completely weaponized, and. But that's an example of how they don't know how to manage empire if they want to maintain the empire, and I think they do. I think Trump loves power. He loves being able to wield the big stick. I
think he wants. I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying that, like I told you before, I don't have faith, but I have hope. So I have hope that he actually has an instinct of non-interventionalism, and that he is transactional in a way that's positive, right? It doesn't matter why he wants to make peace with Russia. It only matters that he does. Like I tell people, it didn't matter if Lincoln freed the slaves because he thought it would help him get laid. It doesn't matter what his intention is. It only mattered that he freed the slave. So I'm just hoping, and I have to live with hope. And so I'm hoping that, if Trump doesn't go along and start a World War III with Iran, I mean, that would be horrible if he did that. I'm hoping he doesn't do that. It looks like he might.
Yeah, I agree with you that, we rewrite our own history. Lincoln was not actually an abolitionist. He wanted to send the blacks to, to Africa or somewhere. And it was really the abolitionists, it was Frederick Douglass and these forces the abolitionist movement before the war they were just seen as kind of dreamers. And then, of course, because of the Civil War, Lincoln's hand was forced. So, yeah, you're right about intent. I feel that way on Ukraine. I just want the thing to stop. I don't, if he wants to go, have dinner with Putin and, join the dictator club, fine. I think that probably is his motive. I just thought the war in Ukraine was insane from the start, and long opposed it. So you're right about that in terms of that particular issue. But I think his overall intent, and again, we will see. Time will show. I think his overall intent is not to do what Christian Parente, who I also love and think is great, and you and I want, which is dismantle empire, dismantle these organs of internal security, like end the wholesale surveillance, restore civil liberties, deconstruct the carcel state. We didn't even talk about that. 2.3 million Americans, 40% of whom have never been charged with physically harming another human being. I mean, it's insane. And of course, it's just a form of social control for the poor, particularly the urban poor. So I don't think that there is that intent to restructure the society. On particular issues like Ukraine, that's a plus. But I wouldn't extrapolate that to say that he's going to restructure society in the way that it needs to, or he is going to dismantle empire. But again, that's conjecture. I never met Trump. I don't know many of the people around him. I know Tulsi Gabbard. That's about it. So I don't know.
Well, okay. Well, I'm going to have hope.
Well, you know what Johnson said about, he said, when you get divorced and remarried, it's the triumph of hope over experience.
Well, listen, I'm sure the animals thank you for being a vegan if they could. So that's a great thing. I really appreciate you coming on and being generous with your time. And I always look forward to talking with you. Everybody should check out Chris Hedges' Substack. Doing great work. He's all self-contained now. This guy doesn't have any sugar daddies.
No, you told me to do this years ago. So.
It's working out for you.
Yeah, it is. But they forced me to follow your advice.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, did they ever crack into your phone? They used Pegasus to get into my phone, my computer, and my iCloud.
Oh, I asked Bill Binney if he, Bill Binney wrote Trailblazer, and then of course blew the whistle because he wanted it to be used for wholesale surveillance of potential terrorists, and of course they used it for all of us.
Yes.
I asked Binney if he encrypted, and he started laughing, and he said no, and he said, let me tell you. Not only do they follow, but in real time they follow a few thousand people, and you're probably on the list. So,
yeah, it's. I know. There's no getting out of it. Okay, all right, Chris Hedges. Thanks again. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy. Keep up the great work.
Right back at you. Come see us on tour. We're going to be in Baltimore, Hartford, Connecticut, Syracuse, Atlantic City, Levittown, New York, Cohoes, New York, and Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.